Hi, welcome to In Darkness, A Light Still Shines. My name is Jessica Hossman. I'm the Senior Director of Trauma-Based Initiatives at the Children's Palace.
And I'm Barry Feeker, Executive Director of the Topeka Rescue Mission.
And we met with Brett Durbin, who is the Executive Director of the Trash Mountain Project, last week. And Brett just shared with us a phenomenal story about how he got connected with trash ministry, I guess you could call it, going into garbage dumps across the world, and visiting different places. And this was a segue off of an encounter that you had in your first years of ministry at the Topeka Rescue Mission, where you had a situation occur. Your back was kind of up against a wall. You weren't quite sure how things were going to go forward, and you had an encounter that may or may not have been angelic. And boy, I know here we were really on the edge of our seats last week listening to Brett tell us about a situation where something similar but different happened at a garbage dump, where there were individuals clear across the globe just happened to be praying for him at the same exact moments that him and his team, their lives were in danger. There happened to be men directing the way that you and your team saw, but here, after all, after it was said and done, you're back, you're looking at camera footage and there's no men. Could have been angels, maybe not. I mean, what is the explanation? We're not sure. And I'm just really excited to come back and just really dive into how do we explain or not some of the ways that God intervenes when we really don't know what we're doing? We really don't understand how we could possibly end up in a situation that we're in, why God would possibly call little old us unequipped, maybe lacking faith in some different areas, but yet he calls us to these extraordinary things that seem so far beyond ourselves, and we have the opportunity to see him show up over and over again. So join us here. We'll be right back to hear a little bit more about Trash Mountain Project and things that God is doing all over the world. Stay tuned.
This production is hosted by Topeka Rescue Mission Ministries, bringing help and hope through faith with its sleeves rolled up. If you would like to support Topeka Rescue Mission Ministries, text TRM Give to 77977 and start giving today.
Welcome back to In Darkness, A Light Still Shines. Brett, when you were with us last week, you had us all on the edge of our seats. And for those who maybe didn't get a chance to see that episode, could you give us just a condensed version of what we were talking about in terms of your encounter, pretty much a near-death encounter that you had when you were visiting a trash dump? And tell us a snapshot of that, and then what has been going through your heart and mind and your ministry since that occurred.
Yeah, we were in Cambodia, and the real snapshot of it was we went into the trash dump there at night, which is hindsight being 2020 was not a place we should have been.
Right.
But the gang that runs that community didn't want us there. They also saw our equipment, camera equipment, and basically we were warned by someone in a truck that they were waiting for us to kill us and rob us, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so we left, started hightailing it out, and then a couple of the guys actually broke off from the gang and they followed us out. And I looked at them one last time, and there was a very obvious moment something startled them and scared them, and they hightailed it their way, even though they were the ones with weapons. And I was standing by myself as the group kept walking and thinking what just happened. And then I had a sequence of a couple of nights waking up by hearing something. One was scripture, John 14, and the other was what I've gone on to say was a command. It was, don't you dare deviate from this path I have you on. Yeah. As I've been praying about, is this what I'm supposed to do with my life? As my wife's at home praying. Right. And then coming back and finding out there's people, at least that one morning at church, I heard from 4 that were actually stopped either at work or brought out of bed, woke up to pray for our team, which was a pretty humbling thing. And then the final piece was the picture we took of the truck that warned us, that only picture we took of any of those trucks, and the guys that warned us in the cab, and the person or persons on top of the truck waving and smiling at us did not show up in the picture. And I even tested the other guy that was with me before leading him in, asking what he remembers before letting him look at the picture again. And nothing showed up. So we're left with a lot of questions of what was that? We made it back. And that was the moment that really, in my mind, Trash Mountain Project was officially born. It was not just going to be something that I tried to do on the side, or that we maybe took a trip once a year. It was, this is a huge problem, and let's see what we can figure out.
Sure. Anything like that ever happened to you before? I mean, there were so many things that lined up after the fact. 4 people coming up to you separately and telling you that the Holy Spirit had basically prompted them to pray right when you needed prayer. People being startled that were coming after you and turning the other way and basically going the other direction for an unknown reason to you. People being there that weren't really there, and you having evidence of that later. I mean, there was a whole bunch of stuff that happened on that one trip. Anything like that ever happened to you before?
Not to that magnitude, and I think, and even the hearing a voice,
the audible voice, absolutely.
It helped me a lot to have all these other things surrounding it, because you do kind of question yourself in those moments. Okay, was that a dream or what? I know I was awake, but the logical part of me is fighting and analyzing this. And then when you see the whole picture, no, I'd never had anything quite like that, where there were so many different confirmations of what it was and what was being done, and that it was definitely outside of anything I could have done.
Sure.
And so
what did that do for your faith in the foundation of Trash Mountain Project?
I think at first it crushed my faith, because I realized that I was the one questioning God and saying, I need you to tell me. So there was a part of me that a friend of ours, we all know Jim Congdon, a pastor here in town. He helped me. He was like my devil's advocate with some of these things that have happened with Trash Mountain like this. And one of the things that he was, talking about was that it's really not a sign of maturity in your faith if you're throwing out a fleece, so to speak, saying, God, I need you to show me or tell me, that's actually possibly an immaturity when you do that. And I felt very immature. I felt very lacking in faith at that moment. But it was also, God knows me better than anyone else. He knew what it was going to take to get my attention. And unfortunately, I guess it took a lot of things happening all at once that could have ended very badly to get my attention. But since that time, I mean, that story is what I think gave my wife and I the confidence to go ahead and step out and do it, even though it did not make logical sense. Everyone around us is telling us this can't be done. Our economy just took a dive. This is 2009, and you're not going to be able to support your family. There's no one's going to be able to support this, but just still saying no. If God told us to do it, He's in it. So the minute I think He's not in it, I'd walk away.
So a decade later,
You have been to at least 59 different trash dumps in different places around the world. You've seen some of the greatest immense suffering. Has there been any other times that you have said, I can't do this anymore, or this is too much, or how do you keep moving forward?
Yeah, there's been plenty of those times, both for my wife and me, sometimes together, just how to keep doing this. And I think I've said before, and this is still how I feel, that God knows me, and the bad, the good, the in between, and I don't take what happened in that moment in Cambodia as a request or a call. It was something I was told to do. It was a command, and I take that very differently. And so I think even though there's times when it's like, gosh, I want to throw my hands up, or this is frustrating, or why isn't this working, or there's not money, or whatever it may be. I mean, you guys know it's all the same problems here. That I think God always has a way of showing up, and maybe not in as grandiose a way as what we just talked about. That's those are the exception, I think.
Have you looked for those kind of grandiose things and don't get them?
Yes.
What does that do?
That is not fun. I think there's more times than not that you wish God would do something like that
Speak
to
very
make it
plainly,
clear.
very clearly.
Yeah, and even especially when you sit there and you're thinking, God, you know my heart. I'm willing to do it. I just need you to tell me. And it's like, well, he kind of already has.
Yeah.
I think that's the hard part. And I think that's the part we all have to come to a realization of is he already has.
Yeah.
He's already told us. And if he wants to veer us in a certain direction, he will.
Yeah.
I think that's the God's providence thing, and yes, we still have our freedom to do things, but God's going to get what God wants out of you. And I think sometimes that's when we see these things, and before that happened, I mean, I grew up in a church. I grew up with a background that those things, like you said, those were like Bible things. You didn't see that, or, those don't happen today. And I guess I'm here to say that I've seen things that I know happened, and they are not explainable outside of God.
I think for people who really haven't experienced that, or maybe don't understand that still can happen today, that's one issue of hearing this. Another issue is there are people who look for those signs all the time.
Yeah.
And so the balance between that, that's been my challenge, is that I've had some moments like we talked about last segment, last week, in regards to somebody showing up that I couldn't explain at all, had a number of those other things, but that's not the norm. And so wanting or demanding that God gives us those kind of signs in order to obey him doesn't work.
Right.
So eliminating the possibility doesn't work.
Yeah.
Putting it on our schedule doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so how have you balanced that whole thing of being in this literal trench for a decade, of feeling like you're exhausted? As a matter of fact, you've been sick. You got a pretty significant physical ailment out of this. End up in the hospital for how long?
10 days from that time.
10 days from being in a trash dump. So there's been a pretty good cost that you have paid, and that's one of many. So how do you balance that out, and how do you keep moving forward when now you've got this revelation? God can speak to me very clearly, but sometimes I don't hear it that way.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked before. I kind of went to you as you're a lot older than me, so I figured you had, some wisdom to share with me.
My life's been harder than yours, actually. We're not that in age.
We're actually the same age.
Exactly.
This is just how hard I've worked.
It's really easier in a trash dump than it is in Topeka, Kansas. So,
no, and I think I make light of it because I think both of us struggle with that same thing, and that it is hard to know, like, you go through something like that, and at least for me, the most exciting part of my job, when people ask, like, what do you like best about you do? It's seeing God move.
Yeah.
But the seeing God move, where it's this real physical thing where you can't say it's anything else.
Right.
Those are few and far between. Usually it's all these things that come together. It's much more blurred by the whole picture. And to me, I look at that as, if we can come to an understanding of that picture, and say that all these things that are happening right now, even sitting here at this table with cameras and everything else, that every one of these things is going to lead to something else that God's in control of, it becomes easier. But there was, in those early days with Trash Mountain, there were several things that happened in a few year period that it's like, man, can we just expect this? Are we going to get to see these things all the time? And then there'll be years where nothing. People are like, so what's the latest story? I'm like, struggle and not hearing God.
Sure. And I'd like to hear, because I know when you wrote In Darkness, a Light Still Shines, you were very raw and transparent about those times where you were in the dark yourself with hopelessness and despair, and thinking, like, God, what have I done? What have I said yes to? Like, I am not cut out for this. And it sounds like you've had those same experiences from the get-go as well, going, Lord, like, I am just not able to do this. I'm not capable. So for both of you, when you have been in the darkness yourself and the enemy is plummeting your thoughts with, Brett, you're foolish to think that you can really make a difference. This is such a huge problem. Barry, like, there's so many issues that are going on over and over again. There's no way that your life can really make a difference. And, the enemy, I think for so many people watching, we move forward in a direction that we feel like we're supposed to go. And just as quick as we do, maybe we have some of those awesome, glorious things that we can say, yes, God, we know this was you. And those are our markers along the way. But then that stranger comes and whispers in our ear with a vengeance, there is no way. You're not cut out. You're not capable. Maybe depression starts to set in. That worry, that what if, that how, the challenges of provision and finance. And so it can be so easy to give up, to go get a different type of call in life that maybe is a little bit more comfortable, which would be good, but maybe not that same call, and to get discouraged. How do you guys keep moving forward when you've been in those dark places? And what encouragement could you give to people that might be watching right now, that might be stuck right now, saying, I don't know if I can keep going forward. This is too hard.
That's a great question.
You want to take that one?
Well, you and I have talked about this quite a bit. I think that God will only give us those things that we are prepared for, even when we don't know we're prepared for them.
Okay.
And so I know with myself, one of the chapters in the book is called Ground Beef.
Mm-hmm.
And so all we really needed was tonight's meal.
Mm-hmm.
We needed some food now. That was a big, big deal
mm-hmm.
at that time when we had to feed 50 people and we had no food.
Mm-hmm.
I was not prepared at that time to believe God for millions of dollars
mm-hmm.
and a whole army of people working to develop a ministry that has got quite a bit of reach here. So I wasn't ready for that. What I was ready for is to find that God could meet the need in the small place. At that moment, I didn't believe that he would. That's pretty transparent in the book. I've known when we were writing the book, we said, let's just be real here. That's what I like about you, Brett. You're real. Jessica, you're real. We need to be real about these things. We're not super spiritual giants here. Some people will put us in that category because of the experiences. I know with Brett, you probably wrestled, or maybe not wrestled with this, but you've been having these admirers that say, wow, Brett Durbin, man, he is the hero of heroes. He's Superman going into these trash dumps all over the world. I've had some similar experiences. I know, Jessica, you have. That's not us.
Right.
What we are is individuals who day by day are learning from faith to faith how God equips us and works with us in this life. And I can say today I may arrive at a crisis of faith. Tomorrow I may arrive at a crisis of faith, a doubt, a worry, a concern. But one of the neat things about it, and I'm guessing this with you, Brett, is that when you stayed and you said that marker a decade ago was God clearly saying, this is what I want you to do, it gave you an understanding to go forward, even though you haven't had those audible experiences or those coincidences of people saying they'd prayed for you or whatever. What you can do, is I can do, and we can do right now, is we can look back and say, thank God, he has shown us step by step that he's faithful in everything. And so today, if I face a monumental challenge, a crisis of faith, it doesn't last as long as it used to. It's not quite has the same impact as it used to. I don't feel like throwing in the towel like I used to. But can I say that it's totally easy, and that next big challenge, whether it's financial challenge or resources or whatever the case might be, a crisis of working with people, I can say this, that God has shown us the way before.
Yeah.
And so because he's been faithful, he is a good father, and he has empowered us to do things that we can go not to one trash dump. We can go to 59 trash dumps. We can go from maybe a men's shelter to a family shelter, to a neighborhood outreach, to a children's palace, to human trafficking, addressing those things. We weren't ready for that in the very beginning.
Right, sure.
But God has equipped us, and God has done amazing things in the same way with you. You and I have talked about fear.
Yeah.
We face fear, and we do one of three things, as those traditional words go. We either fight, flight, or freeze. Yeah. And then you and I talked about a fourth one, follow. And so either we're going to fight our way through it, we're going to run from it, or we're just going to be frozen in the midst of that fear and that challenge, that doubt, that worry, that non-provisional, whatever. Or we're going to stop and we're going to say, Lord, I'm going to follow you and let him plow the ground. So does that make that kind of what we're talking about here? And what would you say to people, Brett, as Jessica has brought forth, to encourage them when they face a fearful situation in their life? It may not be a ministry, not going to trash dump or working in homeless services or whatever, but they may be facing something right where they are in their home. They may face it at work, maybe a health issue. What do you say?
I think it's a mistake. I agree with everything you just said. And I think for me, and something we've talked about is a lot of times we look at fear and lack of faith as synonyms. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think all of us are going to face fears. We're all going to deal with things that cause worry or whatever it may be. And how we respond to that, I think, is where we learn. I think that's where we kind of grow to that next place and try to respond differently the next time. And that whole follow word, it's a nearly impossible task to follow perfectly. Like Paul said it was be slaves. We're slaves to Jesus, and I look at that and I think, well, and that has its own like words, that has its own mental picture for us culturally and all these different things. And it's like, am I actually doing that? Do I feel like and you can get very down on yourself. And I think the key is just take a thing at a time and don't get overwhelmed. Right. And if you do, then just take a step back, look at it, talk to someone. I mean, we've talked about, one of the people that's been helping us through some of this discussion he's a counselor here in town. I mean, there's been times where I didn't know how to cope with something I saw and having someone to talk to was huge. And understanding some of that context that I had or some of my experience in life, all of us have such different stories, yet we're all part of this one story. Yeah. And I think it's a mistake to get down on others, definitely, or a mistake to get down on ourselves when we are having those times, because we're all going to have them. I mean, that's what me and you have talked about is how many times have we failed, or how many times have we wanted to hear from God, and then maybe we even thought we did, and we may have made a mistake, and so
I think that is helpful in and of itself, because I know that there are leaders that think that they have to have it all together all the time. Yeah. And because people are looking to me, and because this is who I am or what I'm doing, and I've got people looking to me, I can't ever admit failure. I can't ever admit weakness. And what I hear you both saying is it's going to come. And one of the ways that we move forward as leaders is recognizing that when it comes, don't be afraid to talk about it, be real with God about it, and keep moving forward. And sometimes that moving forward is getting out of bed in the morning and literally just putting one foot in front of the other. And that's okay. It doesn't make you less than because you struggle with crisis of faith sometime, or because you struggle with some of those awkward feelings of what the heck am I doing? God uses you. God uses us. God uses everyone in spite of those weaknesses, and often because of them, because you're a humble man of God. You're a humble man of God. I know you both, and I've never once seen either of you say, hey, look at me. Look at what God's done through me. You're recognizing and walk as men who recognize that you're being faithful to follow the Lord, and he's doing these things as a result. So tell us a little bit more about, from a practical sense, what Trash Mountain does.
Yeah, I mean, I would be, it would be hard not to mention it just without, to us, the foundation of everything has been prayer. And that can sound cliche, but for me, it's kind of like that Cambodia story. There were people praying that we didn't ask to pray. Right. We've had, situations where what we're doing is going to take prayer. It's going to take God to step in. But, in a practical sense, it's the church. It's God's people. It's people that may not even share the same faith of us. Like I mentioned before, is they see this and it's a problem. They should, someone should do something on this. And I think we have an opportunity there as the church to say, hey, why aren't we involved in this? Why don't we have our hand in this? And so for us, that looks very similar to a lot of the things you do here. It's education for kids. It's, some of those, like there's those relief efforts, you have starving kids, well, feed them, and no clean water, get clean water, right. Healthcare, all these things that just keep you at a basic level here. And then you start getting into how are we going to see this person thrive in society and not just survive? And so it's kind of everything in between there, which again, it's very comparable to what we see here. And we want to see people thrive. And I think when we do see that, they inevitably look to God throughout that process. It might not be right away. It might not be a hey, can I pray that prayer with you right now?
Mm-hmm.
But they come back to you 10 years later and say, I saw God in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brett, you and I have had this conversation. There are some people that are interested in helping people overseas. And they think, the poor in America really have it great. And there's some people say, we got to take care of people at home.
Mm-hmm.
Let other people take care of people overseas. You and I have been right in the middle of that debate because we're local, you're global. We're both headquartered in Topeka, Kansas, the heartland of America. How would you address this so people would understand which one should we choose to go after the most?
I think from a faith perspective, which I can go ahead and take, that's an easier answer just because we can't look at people that are on the other side of the world as not our family. It's a global family. I mean, we really do have that in front of us. And for us specifically, it's these areas, and so I totally get when people bring that up to me and, well, what are you doing locally? And it's tough. I hate having the answer of, well, this doesn't exist here, so we're not, and some will just not want to be involved in that. But if you look at the picture of the church, if you look at the picture of what missions was, even in the New Testament with the very first disciples and then everyone that spawned out of that, it was everything right there in their own home, in their church, to that, we've all heard that, to the city, to the state, to the world, and so I don't think it's not either or. I mean, I think it has to be both. And so, but if you feel called to work with the rescue mission, the Topeka Rescue Mission in Topeka, knock it out. Do it to the best of your ability. And it's no different than someone going and working in a trash dump overseas. It's not any different. And so I think it needs to go both ways, where it's like, we have to be very good with, well, that person's, that's what God's put them in, and do it to the best of your ability.
Yeah.
It's one of the things we have to get over, you and I have to get over, is that competition thing.
Yeah.
What about those resources? There's limited resources. Is there limited resources? No, there's not limited resources with God. If people will simply do, Brett, what you've done and what some others have done, and that is say, Lord, I want to do what you want me to do. You've called me to do a certain thing. And the thing is that it's not about the three of us sitting at this table who are these people who have made this decision to follow God. There's an army of people that God has brought together to go to 59 trash dumps. And how many more would you say are in the whole world that you haven't yet got to?
We've had different estimates on it, but my safe estimate in my mind is somewhere over 5,000.
5,000 trash dumps.
Wow.
Trash Mountain is a very unique ministry in the whole wide world. Birthed out of Topeka, Kansas. And we're sitting here today with a pioneer.
Yeah.
We're sitting here, not to puff you up, and we know about that. But seriously, Brett, you said yes. God met you in an incredible place at an incredible time where maybe you said you were naive and maybe kind of stupid to go at night into a place that was gang-ridden, into a dump. But that's the kind of guy you are. You're a bold guy that grabs a hold of the things of God. You would not be just an average person in this world. You wouldn't live that way. I know you well enough to know that you want to embrace the things of the Lord regardless of the risk, knowing that he will never fail you. He will never let you down. And so we have an army of people around us. It's not just us. It is an army of people watching this right now, listening to this right now. Some people are questioning, well, that's not me. Yes, it is. Just do whatever God has asked you to do, and just watch him unfold in maybe supernatural ways, maybe just common ways, but watch what he does. And then a decade later, in my case, 3 decades later, we can look back and we say, God's always been faithful, always been faithful. And that will propel us to go forward, to embrace the darkness and to bring the light inside that darkness. Brett, thank you for being with us here. We had a cliffhanger last week. We carried it on now. We could keep on going with you. This is amazing. There's so much more about Trash Mountain Project, so much more that we could say, and we're probably gonna have you back one of these days to do this. And in the meantime, just remember to pray for Brett and his team with Trash Mountain Project, and pray for all of us as we are all engaged of being in the dark. And God has commissioned us to bring light in the midst of that darkness. So stay tuned. Jessica and I'll be right back, and we'll wrap this up today.
Thank you.
Thank you to Furniture Mall of Kansas for sponsoring the In Darkness, A Light Still Shines video podcast. We appreciate your support.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Barry, I don't know about you, but I've heard Brett speak before. I've met him, and I've heard the story that he shared before, but it seems like every time I'm impacted and hearing it in a different way. And what kept ringing through my mind today was that you don't have to have this grandiose call in your life going into 59 different trash dumps, creating a rescue mission, building a palace to have God use you. And regardless of what we're doing with our lives, and this goes for everybody in this world, one key thing is to follow. And not everybody has that real tangible relationship with Christ where they're going to get woken up in the middle of the night like Brett shared and hear God say, this is what I've called you to do. There might be people that maybe doubt that that's even possible or that God even exists in that way. But how I look at it is we all have different passions and different desires, different things that interest us. And I believe that God put those passions and desires there to guide us on what that path might be for our life. And I can just kind of envision that there might be people that are watching going, well, gosh, I don't have the desire to do rescue mission work or international work or missions in general or ministry in general. I really enjoy working with numbers and doing accounting, or I really enjoy working at a cash register. I really enjoy serving food. I mean, and that's okay. And I think a key thing to take away is be faithful in what you believe God has called you to do with your life, and then remain faithful in that.
Yes. No, absolutely. You know, people are looking at us or listening to us at this table right now. They don't see what's going on behind the scenes right now. There's a crew of people that have set up the lights, have built the set, who are doing all the filming, are going to do all the editing, and that's their passion. That is what God has assigned them to do. I know Brett really well. He knows me really well. We spent quite a bit of time together, and what people again will look at is superhero. You know, not the case.
Right.
As I know Brett and as he knows me, we're just regular people
Right.
who have a particular assignment
Right.
while we're here. And I think that that's the key here is that God, we hear this thing that he loves all of us. And sometimes that's hard to believe or embrace, but the fact is he does, whether we can believe it or embrace it right now. The other thing is he has a purpose. And so everybody in this whole wide world has a purpose. You know what I find is heartbreaking? Many people don't recognize their purpose. And it's okay to just be transparent before God and before each other and saying, what is my value on this earth? You know, the people that come into our shelters, the little kids at the Children's Palace here that come in here, they have one big question. What is my value? And that's what we love about the Children's Palace and what you and your team do here is that you help every child and every parent who brings their child here to understand that we believe that they are royalty in God's sight and ours as well. So everybody who is watching or listening to this, I think the communication is here is you have great value. God has got an assignment for you. How exciting we have found it to be in spite of the hardships, in spite of the darkness, in spite of the fear that may come of following God's path. He is always faithful to bring that light that we need in the midst of our darkness or our questions.
Absolutely. And as we are faithful in the little things, we are going to run into darkness. It's all around us. Sometimes as soon as we step out of bed in the morning, we see darkness. And maybe that darkness comes in the form of how our physical bodies are wasting away. Maybe it comes in the form of challenges within the home. Maybe it's stepping outside of the house and encountering the various levels of darkness and evil that are present in our world. But every single day in each one of those situations, we have the opportunity to share that light of Christ. We have the opportunity to be the ones that change that darkness into light through our obedience, through putting that step one step in front of the other. And it can be the great big things.
Mhm.
It can be starting international ministries or local ministries or organizations, but it can be in the very little things as well.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's so important to remember. And we can change a life simply through our presence.
Mhm.
And I know that there are people that are watching right now that have no idea the impact their life has had
Yeah.
because they're thinking, but I don't have anything great to give. I don't have any significant
Not
call.
true.
I can't imagine doing any of these things.
Not true.
And you're right, it's not true. And I think that if we all knew the impact our presence had on the world around us, we
Mhm.
would be amazed and begin to start to see that value and purpose in a new way. And to me, that's an exciting opportunity for us to be able to bring light into darkness.
Mhm.
And I just really hope that everybody that's watching this realizes that you can do that same thing.
Mhm.
Big things, small things, ordinary, everyday things. Your life makes a difference, and you have the opportunity to bring light into the darkness around you. And if you got out of bed this morning and you messed up and maybe added to the darkness, what is so awesome is that you have another opportunity right now to start again.
That's right.
And
That's right.
so thank you so much for joining us once again for In Darkness, a Light Still Shines, and we will look forward to seeing you again next week.
Lord, forgive me for the times when I put more confidence in my intellect than in you. I want to see beyond the realm of my natural circumstances and experience your hand at work in my life and the world around me. I hunger after the realities of you, Lord, and I choose to believe. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks for joining us. Our goal is to inspire, inform, and equip you to engage in the community around you. Join us next week for another episode of In Darkness, a Light Still Shines.